The helicopter had been circling for the better part of an hour, and Detective Evelyn Flynn could already tell it was going to be a long morning. She parked at the curb, killed the engine, and sat a moment watching the aircraft bank out over the water. Below the bluff, the surf worked at the rocks the way it always did along the stretch of coast, patient and indifferent. Firefighters, paramedics, and 2 uniformed officers stood along the fence line, doing what people did at scenes like this, waiting, watching a body they couldn't reach. Because that was the problem. The woman was down there, on a narrow shelf of rock 100 feet below, and the only way to her was a trail too steep and too loose to carry a stretcher. The terrain would decide how this recovery went, not the department. It usually did. A hiker had found her a little after sunrise. A local, out early with a camera, headed down to shoot the water. He'd called it in, then sat on a rock and, by all accounts, hadn't moved since. 26 years on the job, most of them in Boston, and she still hated the ones that came in with the daylight. Nothing good ever waited at the bottom of a cliff at 6 in the morning. She got out of the car. A uniformed officer crossed to meet her. Young, careful, the kind who still straightened up around a detective. Detective Flynn? She nodded. What do we know? He glanced toward the edge. Female, mid-30s. ID? Looks like a Marla Jensen, from the cards in her purse. Flynn filed the name and kept her face still. Cause of death? Too early. Could be a fall. Could be. She walked to the fence and looked for herself, because looking for herself was the one habit that had never led her wrong. The drop was 100 feet, easily, more if you counted the rocks that finished what the fall started. One bad step would do it. So would one good push. From up here, the two looked exactly the same, which was the trouble with a place like this. A section of the fence was broken, splintered outward at the top of the trail where the ground gave way to air. She made a note of it and said nothing. Anyone else down there when he found her? No, ma'am, just the hiker. Flynn looked back at the house behind them. It sat at the very lip of the bluff, all glass and clean angles, the kind of home that cost more than she'd earn in 2 lifetimes and came with a view worth killing for. Every window was dark. Whose place? Vacant. Owner passed a few months back. Some real estate outfit's been managing it since. A vacant house, no witnesses, a body no one could reach. Whoever this had happened to, the location had done half the work. The officer handed her a tablet. We got photos before the recovery team went in. She thumbed through them. The victim among the rocks, the cliff above, the house at the edge of it, beautiful and blind. Then the last one, a woman's handbag recovered at the top of the trail in the backyard of a house where no one lived. What's in it? The usual, wallet, makeup, business cards. He handed her the evidence bag. She turned it in the light. 2 cards, same brokerage. One carried the victim's name. The other did not. The other read, Cheri Clay. Flynn knew that name. It took a second, and then it came, the way these things always did, out of a back drawer she never fully closed. A missing person report, about 4 months back. A husband who'd walked out of his life without a word and left the paperwork behind. Antonio Clay. The file had gone nowhere, and she'd let it, because there'd been nowhere for it to go. She stood with the bag in her hand and the helicopter turning overhead, and let herself wonder where Cheri Clay was this morning. If the 2 women had worked together, someone would have reached her by now. Then again, maybe that wasn't fair. By every account Flynn had ever taken, the woman had already had a run of months that would break most people. A husband gone, and now, if the cards told the truth, a partner at the bottom of a cliff. Grief tended to arrive faster than the notifications. The people closest to it were so often the last to be told. Flynn slid the bag back into the folder. Below her, the helicopter finally lowered its basket toward the rocks, and the recovery began. At first glance, it was an accident, a fall, a misstep, bad luck, and a worse railing. She'd seen 100 scenes that looked exactly like this one. The trouble was, she'd learned the hard way that the ones that looked simplest were were the ones that most often weren't. And something about this one, the broken fence, the empty house, the second name on the card, had already started to bother her. She didn't know why yet, but she would. 2 days earlier, the late afternoon sun poured through the windows of the freshly staged living room, warm and gold and forgiving, the kind of light that made even an empty house feel like somebody's dream. The property earned it. A beautifully remodeled 4-bedroom, 3-bath Spanish gem perched in Malaga Cove, and the view did most of the selling before Cheri ever opened her mouth. The Queen's necklace swept from Malibu all the way down to the South Bay, the whole shimmering Los Angeles basin laid out below like something you could buy by the acre. One of those rare homes where the view alone closed the deal. This was the easy listing, she thought. All it needed was a buyer. The probate fixer she'd just been handed was a different animal entirely. A neglected wreck out on the Lunada Bay bluffs, leaking roof, shag carpet, decades of deferred everything. But that was a problem for another day. Cheri and Marla were fussing over the last throw pillow. Both of them wore leggings and oversized t-shirts, hair scraped up into messy buns, sweat marks earned honestly over hours of hauling furniture. Marla flopped onto the couch laughing. Cheri, I swear, if we ever quit real estate, we should open a moving company. Cheri smirked, nudging a vase a fraction to the left. We'd be the most stylish movers around, and don't you dare move that pillow again. It's exactly where it needs to be. Marla rolled her eyes, fond. I'm flexible as long as everything's my way. You know, the pillow is fine where it is. Cheri chuckled, just trying to make sure it's perfect for the photos and the open house. Marla shook her head with a grin. And you say I have bad taste. You know, if I picked men with half the care you pick throw pillows, I'd avoid those slick guys with fast cars. Cheri pointed at her. Exactly. I'm telling you, Marla, one of these days, you've got to pick someone boring. Marla laughed. Well, at least I keep things interesting. But you, Cheri, no one can ever outstage you. Cheri gave a playful shrug. What can I say? Control freak by day, super agent by night. Then Marla's grin softened into something quieter. Honestly, though, I wouldn't be half the agent I am without you. You've been my mentor, my friend. I mean it. I'd probably still be trying to figure out how to host an open house if it weren't for you. Cheri chuckled and gave her a small nudge. You've got the talent, Marla. I just showed you how to use it. Now let's get this house sold so we can celebrate properly. They traded a warm smile over the pillow that was, in fact, perfect where it was. Neither of them had any way of knowing how little time was left before everything between them changed. Later that evening, Cheri pulled into her driveway in Palos Verdes Estates, the quiet, hedged pocket she and Antonio had once called their reward. The mid-century house glowed in the fading light, low and clean-lined and timeless, a labor of love they bought as a fixer for the city and ocean views. The neighborhood ran to custom homes and old money and long, unhurried ocean views. On another night, the whole thing might have looked like proof she'd made it. Tonight, she noticed none of it. Tonight, she noticed Jane, across the street, watching, and her mother's voice, carrying from the open front door before Cheri had both feet out of the car. Late again, Cheri? The view was to die for. It didn't do a thing for the tension waiting inside. She walked in, shut the door, dropped her keys on the entry table. Her mother stood with her hands on her hips and a look that said everything before a single word did. Another late night, Cheri? Hudson's already asleep. You missed story time again. Cheri hung up her jacket slowly, because if she moved slowly, she didn't have to look at the hallway, at the strip of dark under Hudson's door. She already knew what was behind it. Her son, asleep. A book on the nightstand with its spine uncracked. The chair beside his bed, empty. Again. She'd promised herself last night that tomorrow she'd be home in time. She kept making that promise. She kept being someone who broke it. And then, the way it always did lately, the guilt turned, sharpened, found a target that wasn't her. Because Antonio had walked away from all of it. The medical bills, the sleepless nights, the endless appointments. the particular terror of not knowing what the future held for their son. He'd left every ounce of it on her shoulders and vanished. Some days she missed him so badly it stopped her breath. Most days she wanted to scream at a man who wasn't there to hear it. "I know, Mom," she said, letting the sigh carry it. "We were staging the house and it took forever. After that, Marla and I grabbed a quick bite. I didn't mean to be this late." Her mother pursed her lips. "I've never been sure about Marla. Something about her. Well, you know how I feel. But more importantly, Cheri, you have a sick son. You can't keep running yourself ragged." "I'm doing the best I can, Mom." It came out sharper than she meant. "Antonio vanished and left us with nothing. I'm the only one providing for this household now. If I'm not out there working, who pays for Hudson's care?" Her mother's face softened, though the worry stayed underneath it. "I know you feel the weight of it all. Just don't let it consume you, okay?" Cheri nodded. She barely heard the words. Her mind had already drifted somewhere else, back to the last real conversation she and Antonio ever had, a few nights before he disappeared. The kitchen had been dark except for the light above the stove. Hudson was already asleep, and the dinner between them had gone cold, untouched. Antonio sat turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands, staring into it like it might answer something. "Antonio," she'd asked softly, "you've barely said a word all night." He looked up, and his eyes carried a heaviness she'd never seen in them before. "Cheri, if something ever happened to me," she frowned at once. "Don't." "I'm serious." A knot pulled tight in her stomach. "Why would you even say that?" He glanced toward the window as if checking that no one stood beyond it. "Because sometimes life changes faster than we expect." "You're scaring me." His jaw tightened. "That's the last thing I want." Silence settled between them. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "You and Hudson are everything to me. You know that, right?" "Of course I do." "No matter what happens, I need you to remember that." She studied his face. "Antonio, what's going on?" For a moment it looked like he might tell her. Then he looked away. "There are some things I'm dealing with." "What things?" "I can't explain." "Why not?" "Because the less you know, the safer you'll be." The words hung in the air. She let out a nervous laugh that didn't sound like her own. "Safer from what?" He didn't answer. His silence answered for him, and a chill crept up her spine. "Antonio?" He squeezed her hand. "If anyone ever asks questions about me, about where I've been, who I've talked to, what I've been working on," he swallowed hard, "you tell them you don't know." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about protecting you." "From who?" Again, nothing, and the fear in his eyes was worse than any explanation could have been. "You're acting like you're in trouble." His gaze met hers. "Maybe I am." The words stole the breath from her lungs. "Then let me help you." A sad smile crossed his face. "That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent." Tears welled up before she could stop them. "Antonio, whatever this is, we'll face it together." He shook his head. "No. If it comes to that, I need you and Hudson as far away from it as possible." "Nothing is going to happen." He wanted to believe her. She could see that he wanted to. She could also see that he didn't. He stood and crossed to Hudson's doorway and watched their son sleep for a long moment before he spoke again. "If there ever comes a day when I can't be here, stop. I need you to know that leaving would never mean I stopped loving either of you." She stared at him. "Why would you leave?" He looked back at her, pain carved into every line of his face. "Because sometimes protecting the people you love means they can't stay near you." 3 days later, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a note, empty bank accounts, and 1,000 questions no one would answer. When Cheri thought back to that night, 4 months gone now, she still couldn't quite believe it had been real. But tonight, for the first time, she found herself turning the memory over and wondering if Antonio hadn't abandoned them at all. Maybe he'd been running from something, or someone. And maybe whatever had terrified him at that dark kitchen table had finally caught up with him. The night Antonio disappeared had started as the best night of her life and ended as the worst. Cheri couldn't stop smiling as she pulled into the driveway. She'd just signed her first luxury listing, the kind of commission that changes a life, and for the first time since Hudson's diagnosis, it felt like she could finally breathe. A text was waiting on her phone. "Can't wait to celebrate tonight. Love you." She smiled. Antonio always knew exactly what to say. He was the steady one, the patient one, and he adored their son, the two of them forever throwing a ball around the yard until the light gave out. She carried a bottle of wine to the door. "Who's ready to celebrate?" she called, stepping inside. Silence. Her smile faded. The house was dark. No music, no television, no smell of dinner on the stove. Nothing. "Antonio?" No answer. "Hudson?" Still nothing. His car was gone. That wasn't unusual, but Hudson's booster seat still sat in the garage, which meant Hudson hadn't left with him. And all at once, her worry sharpened into fear. She went room to room, calling his phone, getting voicemail, until she reached her home office and stopped cold. A single sheet of paper taped to her monitor, her name across the front in his hand. Cheri. Her fingers shook as she pulled it free. "Cheri, I wish I could explain this, but I can't. Please don't try to find me. Remember what I told you the other night. The less you know, the safer you and Hudson will be. Take care of our son. Tell him I love him every day. I love you both more than you'll ever know. Antonio." She read it 3 times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Not Antonio. Not her Antonio. The man who slept beside her every night would never abandon them. Never. And then his warning from that dark kitchen came back to her, every word of it, and her knees nearly went out from under her. Then a colder thought. Where was Hudson? She was still dialing every number she knew when the knock came. Relief, and then not, because it wasn't Antonio at the door. It was Jane, and behind her, half asleep and clutching his baseball, stood Hudson. "Mommy?" Cheri dropped to her knees, pulled him in, and let herself cry into his hair. Oh, thank God. Later, on the porch, Jane told her the rest in a low voice. Antonio had dropped Hudson off that afternoon, said there was a family emergency, asked her to watch him a few hours. He hadn't been alone. There'd been a woman with him, blonde, someone Jane had never seen before. He'd looked nervous, she said, kept checking his phone. That didn't sound like Antonio, not at all. The police came soon after. They photographed the note, collected handwriting samples, asked their questions, and left. Within days, the accounts were empty and the official story had written itself. A man who had cleaned out his family and started over somewhere far away. It was tidy. It was documented. And Cheri never believed a word of it. Not from the man who worshipped his son. Where the money really went, who the woman was, why none of the pieces ever quite fit, she would keep turning over for months, long after everyone else had stopped asking. If Antonio really chose to leave, why had he never once reached out to his son? Cheri came down the driveway the next morning with her coffee, already running the day in her head, and there was Jane across the street, small, yappy dog straining at the leash. "Cheri, dear," Jane's face lit up. "Off to conquer the world again? Always so busy." Cheri managed a quick smile and a glance at her watch. "Morning, Jane. I'm late for a sales meeting." Jane clucked her tongue, reeling the dog back in. "Oh, of course. But I couldn't help noticing you were out awfully late last night. Quite the hours, There was a needle in it, however soft. Cheri's grip tightened on the cup. "Just work, Jane. Always work. Really, I must run. Have a great morning." And she was moving before Jane could answer, sliding into the car, leaving her neighbor and the dog to their post on the sidewalk. The office was only 10 minutes off, down the hill from Palos Verdes to the Hollywood Riviera in Redondo Beach. close enough to the water that the salt air followed her inside and made the whole business of selling houses feel a little lighter. She loved that about the place. Marla was already at the coffee station, scrolling her phone, when Cheri walked in. "Look who finally made it," Marla teased. "Late night?" Cheri laughed. "Staging until almost 9. My mother was thrilled." "Well, congrats on almost catching Derek this month." "Almost doesn't pay the bills." Marla smirked. "Neither does Derek's personality." Both of them laughed. Grant Walker, the broker who owned Legacy Trust Realty and every desk in it, caught Cheri's eye as they came in and gave her that easy smile of his. "Hey, Cheri, when you have a few minutes, let's chat about that potential listing in Manhattan Beach." She told him no problem and headed for the meeting room. Just then, Derek Steele strolled in wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most agents cleared in a month, pausing to admire his reflection in the glass of the conference room wall before he bothered to notice anyone else. "Morning, girls." Marla's smile went tight. "Morning, Derek," Cheri said. He glanced at the production board on the wall. "Looks like another month at the top." He tapped his own name with a grin. "Maybe next quarter one of you girls will finally catch me." "Maybe if we had your ethics," Marla muttered. Derek chuckled. "No, sweetheart, you'd need my work ethic." He turned to Cheri. "Although I gotta hand it to you, Cheri, you're doing well despite the distractions." She frowned. "What distractions?" He shrugged. "The kid, the missing husband, the charity cases you spend all your time with." The room went quiet. Even Marla looked uncomfortable. Derek smiled as if he'd paid her a compliment. "I mean it. Most women would have folded under all that pressure." Cheri kept her smile in place. Most men couldn't handle half of it." A couple of agents nearby snickered. Derek's grin flickered just for a second, then came back. "That's why I like you, Cheri. You've got fight." He straightened his cufflinks. "But this is still a numbers business. Clients don't care how much you care. They care about results." Then Grant stepped to the front of the room and asked everyone to take a seat so they could start. Derek got one more in first. "Oh, and congratulations on that probate lead in Palos Verdes. I hope you're not banking too hard on that listing, Cheri. In this business, allegiances can shift fast for a big enough commission check. Right, Marla?" Cheri froze. Marla froze. Neither of them had said one word about that probate property in front of Derek. Marla recovered with a tight smile, though her eyes flicked toward him. "Derek, I think Cheri knows how quickly things can shift, so let's not push our luck, Derek smirked. Grant started the meeting before Cheri could get a word in, and Marla sat staring after Derek. "I swear that man has spies," Marla said. Cheri forced a laugh, but the exchange sat wrong with her, and it wouldn't shake loose. How did Derek know about the property? When the meeting broke up, Grant caught her by the door, that easy smile back in place. "Is that Derek guy for real?" he said, low enough for just her. "Grab me after if you want to talk. I'm here if you need me." She was still nodding when Derek leaned in toward her, and her eyes narrowed, and she was halfway to saying something she'd regret when Laura appeared at her elbow. "Cheri, excuse me, but you've got an important client on line 1. Needs you now." Reluctantly, Cheri nodded. "We'll talk later," she told Derek, and followed Laura out. In her office, she shut the door and exhaled. "Thanks, Laura. You always know when to pull me out of the fire." Laura handed her a file with a small smile. "I could see where that was going. Derek and Marla seem close lately. You know, I saw them having coffee yesterday morning, before anyone else came in. Might be nothing. Thought you should know." Cheri's expression darkened. "I'll have to watch my back, won't I?" The front door clicked shut behind the departing clients, and Cheri let out a long breath, the professional smile finally sliding off her face. Beside her, Marla tucked her phone into her purse and pointedly did not meet her eyes. "Well," Marla murmured, "that went smoothly." "Yeah, it did." Cheri's voice was tight. They'd just shown a stunning 4-bedroom ranch in Rolling Hills Estates, tucked right off a winding horse trail, sparkling pool, room for a corral, exactly what the family wanted, right down to the daughter who'd been begging for a horse of her own. Add the top-tier Palos Verdes schools, and Cheri could feel this one had legs. On any other afternoon, she'd have been floating. Instead, she made herself ask, what was that comment back at the office about the new probate listing and allegiances shifting? Marla finally looked up, though her face stayed guarded. Cheri, you know how competitive it is out there. Sometimes you have to be creative, that's all. Creative? Cheri repeated. You mean cutting corners, doing something shady. Marla's smile thinned. I mean doing what it takes. Derek's been helpful. He knows the right people and he's introducing me to them. Cheri stepped closer, shaking her head. I'm not comfortable with whatever you and Derek are doing behind my back. We're supposed to be partners, not whatever this is. Marla's eyes hardened. Maybe you should stop being so attached to doing things the old way, Cheri. It's a hot market. You keep up or you get left behind. Cheri didn't answer. She just watched Marla turn away, already back on her phone, and felt something between them slide loose and settle into a new, colder shape she didn't like at all. As Marla walked out of the house, Cheri's jaw tightened. For the first time, she found herself remembering her mother's mornings, the raised eyebrows, the careful little doubts. I hope you're not getting mixed up in something shady, Cheri. And for the first time, she wondered if her mother had been right all along. She'd dropped Hudson at school and was halfway to the office when she realized she'd left her laptop at home. A quick detour in and out in under a minute, that was the plan, right up until she came down the driveway with her keys in hand and Jane materialized on the sidewalk, tiny dog in tow. Out the door again, Cheri? Secret agent business? Jane winked. Cheri smiled despite herself. Just grabbing my laptop. Some of us have to work, Jane. Jane leaned in, conspiratorial. Work or spying on your next mystery listing? You know, I saw a moving truck at that house on the corner. Jane, Cheri cut in gently, I really don't have time to solve the neighborhood's mysteries today, but I promise when I do, you'll be my first call. She ducked into the car with a laugh, leaving Jane and the dog to puzzle out their next case. The moment she walked into the office, she knew something was wrong. The receptionist and Grant and a knot of other agents stood clustered in low, urgent little groups. A few of them were crying. She started toward Grant to ask what had happened, and Laura reached her first, her face gone pale. Cheri. What happened? Laura swallowed. It's Marla. For one suspended second, Cheri's stomach clenched. What about her? She's dead. The words seemed to hang in the air between them. Around the room, someone started crying again. Cheri just stared. Marla didn't come in today. She always comes in first. I should have known something was wrong. Thinking back on the day before felt less like a memory than a bad dream. It had all started so ordinary. She'd been up early, made Hudson's breakfast, packed his lunch, dropped him at school, and gone to work. And the day had filled itself with client meetings and inspections and the endless networking the job demanded. Since Antonio vanished, every commission mattered. His disappearance still shadowed everything. The police had closed the case. Cheri never had. But what gnawed at her most had never been the money, or even the betrayal. It was Hudson. Just weeks before his father walked out, their son had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The surgery had an excellent prognosis, but it would end, for good, any dream Hudson had of playing the sports he loved. Antonio had taken that news harder than anyone realized. Would a man like that really abandon his sick child? She couldn't make herself believe it. Not the man who'd worship that boy. Not Antonio. But it wasn't Antonio filling her head this morning. It was Marla. Because somewhere between yesterday afternoon and this morning, her oldest friend had died. And here was the part Cheri would have to live with. Underneath the shock, underneath the grief, something else moved, quiet and unwelcome. Relief. The deal was still hers now. The commission would still come. Hudson's care would still be paid for. Marla could never betray her again. The feeling should have sickened her. Mostly, it just made her feel guilty for not being sicker. She couldn't stop replaying the afternoon before. The betrayal was fresh, because Marla never would have known about the property at all if Cheri hadn't handed it to her. A few weeks earlier, Marla had been complaining about how hard it was to find inventory for one of her investor clients, a man who flipped luxury homes and paid cash. Trying to help, Cheri had mentioned a probate property she'd just been hired to evaluate, a neglected place out on the Lunada Bay Bluffs, right there in Palos Verdes Estates. The house itself was a disaster. The roof leaked, the landscaping had gone feral years ago, and the interior hadn't been touched since the 1970s. But the location was extraordinary. Perched on the bluff with sweeping views of Catalina and the open Pacific, it had every ingredient of a multi-million-dollar showpiece in the right hands. Marla's investor paid cash and specialized in exactly that kind of opportunity. A place like that would never last a day on the open market, which was precisely why it was never meant to reach it. All they had to do was open escrow. Cheri had trusted Marla. Why wouldn't she? They'd spent years building the business together, sharing clients, celebrating closings, carrying each other through the hard transactions. So when she pulled up to the property that afternoon to set the lockbox and plant the yard sign, and found Marla already there, phone up, taking photos, the surprise came before the suspicion did. Marla looked up, startled. "Cheri, what are you doing here?" Cheri frowned. "What do you mean? It's my listing. I'm getting it ready to go on the market." Marla hesitated. "About that." Something in her voice pulled Cheri's stomach tight. "I meant to tell you sooner," Marla said. "This morning I got the trustee to sign the listing." Relief washed over Cheri. "Oh, good. You got it signed for us?" Marla looked away. "No." The single word hung there. "I got it signed for me." Cheri stared, certain she'd misheard. "What are you talking about?" Marla shifted. "I told the trustee we were working together, that you'd asked me to stop by and finish the paperwork." The blood drained from Cheri's face. "You let them believe it was our listing?" Marla nodded. "And then put it in your name." "I needed this one, Cheri." "You stole it." "I didn't steal it." "You absolutely stole it." And then another piece dropped into place, and Cheri's eyes narrowed. "It all makes sense now." Marla looked confused. "What does?" "Derek." Cheri's voice went hard. "Yesterday morning at the meeting, he made that smug little comment like he already knew something about this listing." She shook her head. "You told him." Marla said nothing. "You fed him information about my clients." "It's not like that." "Isn't it?" Cheri took a step closer. "And Derek? Seriously? You've spent years telling me what an arrogant jerk he is." Marla looked down. "I know." "So what changed?" Marla sighed. "We've been seeing each other." Cheri blinked. "What?" "For a while." And everything fell into place at once. The secret calls, the missed lunches, the sudden shift in Marla's whole manner. "I can't believe this." Marla's voice softened. "Cheri, I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." She took a cautious step forward. "I just want to fix this." Cheri's hand came up on instinct, stopping her short. "Don't." The motion caught Marla's wrist, and her phone slipped free and hit the planter with a sharp crack. "My phone!" Marla dropped to a crouch and snatched it up. The screen was shattered. Cheri shook her head. "I can't even look at you right now." And she turned and walked to her car without another word. Behind her, she heard Marla swearing softly, jabbing at the ruined screen, still very much alive. Cheri never looked back. Now, alone in her office with the news still ringing in her ears, she couldn't stop turning it over. Marla had been alive when she left. Upset, furious, fighting with a broken phone, but alive. Laura had said the body was found at the property sometime that morning. If I'd stayed, Cheri thought, maybe they'd have calmed down. Maybe they'd have talked it through. Maybe Marla wouldn't have been standing out there alone. She should have known something was wrong when Marla never came in. Marla was always one of the first through the door. Cheri had assumed she was just avoiding her after the fight. Now she'd never know. The listing didn't matter. The commission didn't matter. The friendship did. And somewhere between yesterday afternoon and this morning, she had lost one of the oldest friends she had. The police arrived mid-morning, led by a detective whose calm seemed to quiet the whole room without any visible effort. Cheri would learn the shape of her soon enough. Detective Evelyn Flynn had spent 2 decades on the hard streets of Boston, building a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense cop. Tried retiring to sunny Lomita a few years back, and discovered the slow pace left her restless enough to sign on with the small Palos Verdes department, figuring a quiet coast would keep her busy, without the intensity of a big city beat. Even here, though, Flynn had learned one thing. People were full of surprises. They gathered the agents and staff in the conference room, and Flynn made it clear no one was pointing fingers, that they were only building a picture of Marla's day, her habits, her last hours. One by one, privately, they worked through the office. Eventually, it was Cheri's turn. Flynn closed the conference room door behind her and took the seat across the table. No notebook, no hard edges, just that unhurried calm that somehow made Cheri more nervous than any interrogation would have. Thanks for taking a few minutes, Miss Clay. Cheri is fine. Cheri it is. She glanced at the file in front of her. How long have you known Marla? Almost 5 years. Friends? Cheri hesitated. Very close friends. Flynn looked up. You don't sound very certain. We work together every day. In real estate, sometimes your friends are also your competitors. Flynn's mouth twitched. I've heard that about your business. She turned a page. Walk me through yesterday. Cheri took a sip of water. I started the morning at the office. Then I met a client in Torrance about a property inspection. About what time? 9:30. Flynn made a note. After that? I stopped by escrow to pick up closing documents for another transaction. And Marla? She was handling a property here in Palos Verdes Estates. The property where she died? Yes. Flynn studied her face. What was she doing there? Taking photographs. Alone? Cheri shrugged. As far as I know. You weren't supposed to be there with her? No. It came a beat too fast, and Flynn noticed. You sure? Cheri made herself smile. We divided responsibilities all the time. That's one of the benefits of having a partner. Partner? Business partner. Flynn nodded. Were you planning to meet her later? Possibly. We were opening escrow on the property today. Marla's buyer was paying cash. All we had left to do was sign. A significant sale? About $4 million. Flynn whistled softly. That's a nice commission. It would have been. Flynn leaned back. Anyone unhappy about that? Cheri laughed. Detective, have you met real estate agents? For the first time, Flynn smiled. Fair point. Cheri felt herself relax a fraction. Then Flynn turned another page. Did Marla have enemies? No. Automatic. And then Cheri thought of Derek, the rumors, the clients Marla had taken, the agents she'd outproduced. Actually, maybe. Flynn raised an eyebrow. Tell me. Nothing serious, just office politics. Office politics sometimes become serious. Cheri nodded toward the bullpen beyond the glass. Derek Steele. The top producer? You know him? Flynn smiled. Everyone I talked to mentioned him. That doesn't surprise me. What can you tell me about him? Cheri weighed it carefully. He's ambitious. That's a polite word. He and Marla had become close lately. Professionally? I think so. You think so? Cheri shrugged. I don't know anymore. Flynn watched her for a long moment. You don't think Derek had anything to do with this, do you? Cheri looked away. I don't know. It wasn't quite a lie. Flynn stood. One last question. Cheri's stomach tightened. Did you go to the property yesterday? The room felt suddenly, airlessly warm. No. Flynn held her gaze. Not at any point. No. Another lie. Flynn nodded, slow. Okay. But her expression said she wasn't all the way convinced. She opened the door, then paused on the threshold and turned back. Accidents are funny things, Cheri. How's that? Most of the time, they're exactly what they look like. And the other times? Flynn almost smiled. The other times, somebody's lying. Then she walked out. The moment the police were gone, Cheri asked Laura to pull the listing and offer paperwork off Marla's computer. It wasn't a strange request. Marla had leaned on Laura for anything technical, and Laura had set up her machine, her passwords, her transaction files in the first place. If anyone could find it, Laura could. And as far as Laura knew, Marla had simply been helping Cheri with the deal, so there was nothing to question. Give me a few minutes, Laura said, heading for Marla's office. I'll find everything. Cheri nodded. At least one problem could still be solved. Derek was another matter. He'd been sneaking around behind her back with Marla for weeks. Marla had confirmed it was more than business, that there was a romance too, and Cheri thought, not for the first time, that Marla always did have the worst taste in men. A few minutes later, Derek filled her doorway. I hear the police have been asking a lot of questions. Cheri looked up from her desk. They're investigating a death. I'd be concerned if they weren't. He smirked and leaned against the frame. Fair point. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cheri asked, easy as anything. Funny, Derek. Where were you yesterday afternoon? His expression tightened. What do you mean? You didn't happen to stop by the property, did you? For half a second, she saw something cross his face, surprise, or maybe fear, and then it was gone. Trying to pin something on me? He said. No, just curious. He crossed his arms. I'm not the one opening escrow. No, Cheri said evenly. Marla and I had that handled. We were opening escrow today. Derek's jaw went tight. Interesting. The comment bothered him more than it should have, and for the first time she wondered whether Derek had been cut out of the deal entirely, whether he'd expected a piece of that commission, whether he and Marla had argued, whether he'd gone to see her after their meeting broke up. The questions kept stacking. Derek pushed off the door frame. If I were you, I'd be careful what I imply. And if I were you, Cheri said, I'd be ready for more questions from Detective Flynn. They stared at each other a long moment. Then Derek turned and walked away, and Cheri watched him go, and the more she sat with it, the more suspicious he looked. And still, underneath all of it, that other feeling, relief. That Marla could never betray her again, that the deal was still moving, that Hudson's bills would be paid. She told herself the listing had been hers from the beginning, that finishing it wasn't stealing, that she was simply seeing through what she'd started. At least, that was what she told herself. It wasn't my fault Marla died, she whispered to the empty office. But even as she said it, she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. By afternoon, she was in the school pickup line, fingers drumming the wheel, the low sun throwing long shadows across the yard, her mind anywhere but here. Then Hudson came barreling out through the gate, backpack bouncing, and something in her chest loosened all at once. Mom! He climbed in with his usual boundless energy. Guess what? I got picked for the class play. I'm going to be a detective. A small, surprised laugh escaped her. A detective, huh? You've got a nose for mystery. He grinned, then his face scrunched in thought. But Mom, real detectives have to find clues. What clues would I look for? She caught his eyes in the rearview mirror, and her heart pulled. Sometimes the most important clue is just being there when someone needs you. He nodded, accepting it with the easy faith only a child can manage. Then I'll be there. I'll catch the bad guys and help the good guys. She reached back and squeezed his hand. "You already help, Hudson. More than you know." He talked the whole way home about the play, and she let his chatter wash the day off her. Whatever she felt about Marla, whatever guilt and confusion tangled underneath, one thing held steady and clear. She had to be strong for her son. And right now, that meant showing up, no matter how complicated everything else became. Back at the office, after the lights had thinned and the phones had gone quiet, Laura sat down at her desk to pull the paperwork Cheri had asked for. She was good at this part, the quiet part, the part nobody noticed. People rarely noticed Laura at all, and she'd long since stopped minding. It was easier to see a room clearly when the room forgot you were in it. She opened her desk drawer. Marla's phone lay on top, face up, the screen a spiderweb of cracks. Laura looked at it for a moment. Just a moment. Her expression gave away nothing at all. Then she slid the drawer shut, turned back to her monitor, and went on working, the dead woman's phone 6 inches from her knee, and a decision already made somewhere underneath her without her quite admitting she'd made it. She wasn't going to tell anyone she had it. Not yet. Not until she understood what she'd just picked up, and why a woman who never hurt anybody had gone off a cliff the same week she found it. Because Laura Reyes noticed things. She always had. And she was starting to notice that people who noticed things in this office did not seem to live very long.